Now, I don't have time to waste apologizing to y'all for how long this took to come out, okay? Suffice it to say, life has been, it's been real busy. I've been doing a lot of things, but I'm here now, okay? It's like when you drop out of high school, right?
What?
And you were 15. You thought he loved you. You thought you loved him. So then you decided that like keeping the baby was worth it. And I know your mom told you that it was a bad idea, but she just wasn't willing to support your love. Okay? So then you moved in with him, right? But his mom don't really like that you're in the house. So she's making your life miserable and you're too young to get a job. So now you're over here trying to buy your baby food with WIC and you make it through, and you and the guy, you guys don't make it. But it's okay because you're a single mom who works real hard at 2 jobs and never stops or whatever, right?
Who's watching the baby? You still in the mom's house?
And the point is, you're 35, okay? And your baby is now grown and your baby's going to college and now you're over here like, damn, I didn't even finish high school.
15?
So no.
18?
The baby's like 20 now.
She's 35.
Right, she had the baby at 15. Keep up.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. So the point is, you're 35 and your kid's in college, right? And you're like, damn, I didn't even go to high school. You know what? I'm gonna go back and get my GED. This is like that.
How in the hell is this anything like that?
Well, because, I took a break for a while and I did other things and now I'm coming back to it.
That's not. I think you missed a couple steps. I just would like to say that I forgot my Dino Nuggie shirt and that's a tragic miss.
Yeah,
for this
that's
video.
actually terrible. That's actually actually go change your shirt.
That's my contribution.
You have to go change your shirt now because you brought it up. I wasn't gonna say nothing. What up, Ho Biscuits? It's your girl Skitten. Back at it again. I hope you guys enjoyed that. That was literally, I thought of that as I was sitting here. So if it's a little disjointed, no, it's not.
What's the baby's name?
The baby's name?
Julius. Julius the junkie.
Why is he a junkie? I didn't say nothing about no drugs.
He's high off life.
Oh my God.
High off passion and a little sadness.
All right. I'm gonna do a jump cut and Chavez is gonna be right here. Huh? It's
Penis.
like fucking, oh my God.
Cut that out.
Oh my God.
Huh? How's that for a jump cut?
We are here for more Lindsay Nikole history of the world that we know of. And this is the Jurassic period. I've been waiting for so long. Okay. Yeah. All right. So last time we left off with the Triassic mass extinction, and it was a biggie. It was 76% of all. I said it's a biggie, like the phrase isn't mass extinction. Anyway, it was 76% of all species, and so now we are entering into the Jurassic period. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you guys are staying safe and sanitized. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started.
Okay. Hello. In the last video, I mentioned that I can wiggle my ears. And I didn't show you, so
take your hat off.
Just get that out of the way.
Yeah, take it off.
Yeah.
Bitch.
It's a vestigial trait.
Girl.
What? What is the
Now,
problem?
why would you do that?
What is the issue?
Take your hat off!
Now that the formalities are out of the way, we have finally arrived at the Jurassic period, which lasted from 201 to 145 million years ago. While this is arguably the most iconic period in mainstream media, it isn't for the right reasons.
What?
Yes, the dinosaurs are finally in full swing, but not in the way that's typically depicted, and also a lot of other cool shit happened during the Jurassic that had nothing to do with the dinosaurs.
Yeah!
And today we're gonna get into all of this. So, my name is Lindsay Nikole.
Yeah, it is.
And this is the history of life on Earth. That we know of.
This is gonna be good.
Start with a disclaimer. The biggest misconception about the Jurassic is Jurassic Park. The Jurassic Park franchise got everyone all mixed up because most of the species they feature in the movies are not even from the Jurassic period.
Right.
T-Rex, not Jurassic. Mosasaurus, not Jurassic. Velociraptor, Spinosaurus, Ankylosaurus, not Jurassic, not Jurassic, not Jurassic. Dimetrodon, extremely not Jurassic. All the species that I just listed, as well as countless others, except for Dimetrodon, are from the Cretaceous, the following period.
Next.
But I guess Cretaceous Park didn't make the cut. Not as catchy. I get it. Jurassic Park sounds better.
It does.
I mean, it would have if you just would have told me Cretaceous meant T-Rex. I would have been like, yeah.
I don't know. Jurassic sounds better than Cretaceous.
Jurassic did not exist to me until the movie.
But I'm just saying, like, even the flow, Jurassic.
I disagree.
Versus Cretaceous.
You could have been Poop Park. And there's T-Rexes in Poop Park. I'm like, hey, man, poop it up.
But what is Hollywood if not misleading?
Right.
So, at this point, there's a chance you're feeling concerned. If none of those species are in the Jurassic, what am I here for? Sounds like the Jurassic was a snooze fest. Wrong again. The Jurassic was cool as fuck. A lot of cool shit happened for the first time. There are a lot of cool big guys and also little guys. We have a lot to cover. So, let's get the global conditions out of the way. If you remember from last time, Pangea was just starting to break apart a bit at the end of the Triassic, and that fucked a whole ton of shit up. But as now North America and Africa broke apart, became lava land for 600,000 years, and started to form the central Atlantic Ocean, as well as the Gulf of Mexico. So then you had kind of two major land masses you can make out. Laurasia in the north, made up of what is now North America and Eurasia, and Gondwana in the south, made up of what is now Africa, Australia, Antarctica, South America, and India. Generally, in the most general sense, the Jurassic was warm and humid. Seems to have been no ice caps at the poles. The tropics were thriving, and there weren't super extreme seasons. It was quite cozy, quite comfortable. Like Florida.
So you're telling me if the ice caps melt, we'll get dinosaurs back?
Everywhere will be Florida, and we'll have T-Rexes.
Hell yeah. Silver linings.
Like Florida, but better in every way possible. All right, now let's get to the plants. What's going on with the Jurassic plants? As anyone would expect, seed plants are still dominating. Seeds are the shit. So in the Jurassic, you had your cycads, your conifers, which were a big part of Jurassic forests, like all over the place. And there were also ginkgos. There's a chance that doesn't mean anything to you.
Ginkgo
What the fuck
biloba.
is a ginkgo? Ginkgos are an ancient tree lineage that today is only represented by a single living species, Ginkgo biloba.
Yeah.
The ginkgo.
What the hell? Why do you know that?
I think it's like, you can like, they make drinks out of it or something.
This is the last one of the species and we're drinking it?
I think so.
We are savages.
Stasia, but are now found all over the world because they are absolutely sick. You can grow them in a lot of climates.
Yeah.
They don't really care about specific soil or even water. Like, they need water, but they're not like super crazy about it. They're also very pretty, and their leaves are very cute. Also, they get huge. The largest are over 150 feet tall.
My God.
And a single tree can apparently live for thousands of years. So, all around, a sick plant. You know how people call coelacanths and like frilled sharks living fossils?
Yes.
Well, this is the living fossil of the plant.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
They might have first appeared in the late Triassic, but they were definitely present by the middle Jurassic, which is why I waited to talk about them until now. I love ginkgos. I think they're just the best. Another development in the Jurassic, angiosperms. Also known as flowering plants. Today, we have a shit ton of flowering plants. What is a forest without them? It's hard to imagine a world without flowers. What are insects without them? Hard to imagine, I know. But they simply just did not exist for a very long time.
That's
until what
hard to
seems to be the Jurassic. The traditional view of their origin story takes place sometime during the Cretaceous. Fossil evidence pointed to that for a very long time. And flowering plants were definitely present in the Cretaceous and quickly dominated every single ecosystem. But in the last 5 or 6 years, there's been layers of potential evidence stacking for origins in the Jurassic. One piece of the puzzle is Nanjinganthus dendrostyla, a fossilized flower from China, dated to the Jurassic.
What the hell?
170.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Give me a second.
It sounds. She's saying that name like how DC says every name of every UFC fighter ever.
Nanjinganthus dendrostyla.
About 174 million years ago. It seems to have all the key features of an angiosperm, like petals and an enclosed ovary. There's also molecular analyses that point to origins in the Jurassic, or even the Triassic. Also, there's fossil evidence of insects. Whose descendants today rely on flowering plants, so maybe potential evidence there as well. But enough about plants, let's get into the insects. What's going on with the land little guys? While we don't know exactly how they relate to flowering plants in the Jurassic, we know they started to develop a stronger relationship with plants as a whole via pollination. So let's do a quick little recap on what pollination is. Starting with what pollen is. Pollen is made up of the reproductive male structures of a plant, which to us appears as a fine dust. But in reality is plant sperm. It gets dispersed to find female plant structures to reproduce with. The most obvious way to disperse is via wind, effective and used by many plants today. But there is a clear downside. Throw something into the wind and it can end up anywhere, with a good chance of that anywhere being completely pointless.
Like my sinuses.
I guess you're right, technically.
Yeah.
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 It's where good pollen goes to die.
Ends up in my sinuses and makes me and everyone around me miserable.
Right.
Yeah.
Chances of wind getting you to your exact intended destination, i.e. to another plant's reproductive parts, are slim. But you know what frequents all sorts of plant parts on a constant, perpetual, daily basis? Insects. Makes sense to team up with them. If an insect visiting a plant happens to get a little pollen stuck to him, and then just so happens to brush it off on a plant it later comes into contact with, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Matter of fact, it would actually be pretty convenient. Maybe a plant could entice an insect to come visit them more often with a little gift. Nectar, perhaps. Brush a little pollen onto him. And so, the pollination relationship between plants and insects began. The earliest record of this comes from the late Jurassic, and involved groups like early beetles, flies, and possibly primitive moths. Both groups benefited a lot from this relationship. The insects get fed, and the plants get mated. So this led to a really strong coevolution, both groups evolving alongside each other. That especially blossomed in the next period. So, we'll talk about it next time. And as you could probably tell, still exists today. Another big development in the Jurassic, the evolution of eusociality. You know, ants, bees, termites all work together and have their little societies. They've been doing that since the Jurassic. At least it seems as though termites have. This entire conversation is worth having in its own video, so I'm gonna save it for later. For another time, keep on track with the rest of the Jurassic. I almost went down a rabbit hole while researching, and I somehow stopped myself because I knew that it was going to send me way off track. So we're going to cover that later and just continue on. I know I haven't really shown you any specifically cool species yet, and for that, I apologize. We are in serious dinosaur territory, but I was able to find one little cool Jurassic insect to show you. Carotavila popovi. This. Carotavila popovi. Sounds Italian. A type of water bug that wore their eggs on their legs. In 2022, 160 fossil specimens were analyzed, and 30 of them, all female, had this little egg leg. This also might be the earliest evidence of brood care, where parents protect their eggs by carrying them. Personally, I like this. I think this belongs at the Met Gala. Eggs on a string going down someone's leg. I think somebody could pull it off. Maybe Jared Leto. Maybe, God, who else goes to the Met Gala? Someone else who goes to the Met Gala. And speaking of water bugs, let me show you some other water bugs, i.e. marine invertebrates. None of them are bugs. That was a stupid thing to say. What's going on with the ocean little guys? We're gonna start off with the mollusks. Mollusks! Clams, snails, cephalopods, etc. Shit was diversifying. Like the belemnites. You're probably thinking, yes, a squid. No, this is not a squid. This is a hard squid. As in, you know squids as soft-bodied skins. They're soft-bodied through and through. Not the belemnites. They had hard internal skeletons. There's a chance if you've ever dissected a squid in school, you want to correct me. Actually, technically, squids have hard internal skeletons too. But I suggest you don't. Squids have a pen, which is honestly undeserving of the name. It would be more appropriate to call it a broken piece of straw. Belemnites have a bullet-shaped cone internal skeleton. Do not compare their skeleton with a piece of plastic. I don't want to hear it. Otherwise, they did pretty much look like squids. They had 10 tentacles, each with 30 to 50 pairs of hooks made of chitin to latch onto prey. They had been around since before the Jurassic, but were a bit more relevant until now. But one major group that does seem to have their true origin in the Jurassic are the true ammonites. You're probably familiar with them. These beloved extinct cephalopods are known for their chambered shells, which, as they grew, added more chambers to them. They would live in the outermost chamber, and then eventually, when they outgrew it, they would wall it off and form a new one, a new chamber. On the same shell. Like this. The classic ammonite shell shape is that flat spiral. But as time went on, especially during the Cretaceous, some species went fucking nuts. But that's a conversation for next time. Ammonites were all over the place. I guess you can kind of think of them as the replacement trilobites, at least the larger ammonoid group that includes the true ammonites. Over 10,000...
I was going to bring up that the trilobites died in the last series, but it made me sad.
Yeah.
But now that you brought it up, they're finally gone. No more trilobite updates.
R.I.P. to them.
Species of these extinct animals have been identified and found all over the world. True ammonites also help scientists figure out the age of the rocks that they're in because they were so common. They just know if they see an ammonite, they know what the fuck is going on. Fossil evidence suggests that they were predators. Sharp, beak-like jaws to snatch plankton, crustaceans, and other prey. Some ammonites got very big in the Cretaceous, so I will be revisiting them as well. The last marine invertebrate on this lineup is my personal favorite. Actually, it might be my favorite species in the whole video. Dolocaris, a crustacean with eyes like nobody's business.
What in...
I love it!
There's no way. She should probably put the name up in a minute.
Was pretty small, about 8 inches long max, and their eyes took up a quarter of that length, and not for nothing. They had over.
Look at that one.
They had over.
What?
I know.
18,000 lenses in each of their eyes.
18,000.
The only animals we know of with more lenses than that are dragonflies, who have up to 30,000 lenses in each eye. So beat them by a landslide. But Dolocaris was still impressive
That is
nonetheless.
crazy.
They likely used their eyes to make up for their subpar swimming abilities, using the strategy of ambush in murky waters. I wish Dolocaris was still alive today. That was the invertebrates. That's taken care of. Now what's going on in the bone zone? I know Triassic was pretty tepid with the fish. I only had one cool species to show you. But I actually have a correction to make, or I guess more of an addition, because I came across a pretty cool Triassic fish while I was researching for the Jurassic. Don't you love when that shit happens? Like, where were you 6 weeks ago? I was looking for you. But whatever. Allow me to introduce you to Soricthus, an extremely long and slender fish with sharp teeth and a sharp snout. Just pointy overall, like a modern needlefish.
I like him.
The largest could get to about 5 feet long. I like their shape a lot. This is just a really solid fish, if you ask me.
Skinny
and
guy.
that's about it. Now let's get into the fish of today.
Yeah, this like everything we've seen right now has just like so much expression.
Yeah.
This is like the beat period.
Boy, do I have some fish to show you this time. In the couple conversations we've had about fish in this entire series, we've talked about sharks. Actually, you know what? Let me grab my whiteboard. One moment. Got my whiteboard for the fish once again. Okay, so we've talked about the cartilaginous fish, the sharks that evolved from placoderms. We've also talked about the bony fish that also evolved from placoderms. And we've spent a lot of time talking about lobe-finned fish, the ancestors to Tiktaalik and tetrapods as a whole. And we've, so far, really ignored the ray-finned fish. Tossed them aside like a piece of junk. I've probably talked about a couple species here and there, if that, because they're kind of just like, you know, they're the ray-finned fish. Your classic, everyday fish. So they don't seem that interesting to talk about. But this is the point where I say, that is exactly the point. Their evolution has allowed them to become today's classic, everyday fish. And that really becomes important during the Jurassic. During the Jurassic, a new group of ray-finned fishes step onto the scene. The teleost fish. They developed more lightweight and flexible skulls, more efficient swim bladders, thin and flexible fins for better steering, much more flexibility in the jawbone, allowing them to lunge their mouth out to suck up food. And I know this all sounds very whatever, but these developments literally changed the world, because today, teleost fish make up half of all vertebrate species and 98% of all ray-finned fish. They completely and 98% of all ray-finned fish.
What do you mean? They're talking about the ray-finned fish. You don't know? There's only one kind. 98%, that is. They are the fish. And it makes you really understand the things that are really efficient in this world. Flour. Take my stuff to there. It pollens from here to there. We all live. Easy. Easy peasy. You know?
And ray-fins.
That's what I'm saying. They're just spreading seed across the ocean. Millions of years. Crazy.
They completely took over, dude. To an approximation, all fish that you can think of are teleost fish. Goldfish, salmon, electric fish, eels, clownfish, piranhas, seahorse eels, sunfish. I could go on for probably a very long video. The point is, their diversity today is nuts, and their diversity in the Jurassic was nuts as well. Allow me to introduce you to Lindsay, thought to be the largest bony fish to ever exist, that we know of. Some scientists place them as an early teleost group, which would also make them the largest teleost fish to ever exist, if you need that title as well. Current size estimates place them somewhere between 40 to 55 feet long. Like many fossil fish, they had
I'm so sorry.
That is a huge fish. Okay, so imagine. Okay, sushi restaurant. The whole theme is we just take one of those bony fish and we just set it up onto the beach and just walk inside of its mouth to eat sushi.
You know.
But the sushi is its inside.
That's disgusting.
Your table is the plate.
I don't know if I like that.
You sit, squish down in the seat. Take your knife, cutting out chunks of the table. It is your dinner.
I don't think that.
20-minute time limit.
I don't think that's good. I don't.
3-day expiration date on the whole restaurant.
You know who would love this fish, though? You know, like, really, who would love this fish?
Okay.
Luffy.
You are such an incredible nerd to be wishing well Luffy in this.
Luffy would be like, oh, that's dinner.
You know, One Piece has definitely taken some inspiration for some of these fish.
Yeah.
Because their fish are ridiculous in the ocean.
They had many cartilaginous parts. Even though they were bony fish, they also had cartilage, which obviously doesn't fossilize well. And like many of the marine giants we've come to know and love, Lindsay was a filter feeder, consuming plankton all around the world. I want to note, I don't know if you remember, I mentioned a paper during the Dunkleosteus portion of the History of Life series. What was that, the Devonian? It's called the Orbit Opercular Length. or OOL. I'm going to call it the ool. He showed
Yes, I remember you saying that.
tool to literally thousands of fish that the ool can really accurately predict the length of the rest of the fish. And luckily for us, the dunk's tank of a head can be accurately measured to determine the ool. And the ool is much shorter than you would expect. Slap! The ool might come to bite lead sickness in the ass as well. I just actually don't know yet. And I probably should have looked at that paper again because I don't know if they were mentioned. I'll let you know in the comments.
Okay.
Regardless,
That's
it's a
fine.
fish. Another cool Jurassic species that was also a teleos fish, or an early relative to true teleos fish, was a Spitorhynchus, a long, slender fish with a sharp snout, much like the Triassic Surichthys, but different. A Spitorhynchus, I like their name. A Spitorhynchus are believed to have been active hunters, based on their streamlined bodies and their mouths filled with sharp, cone-shaped teeth. Now what about sharks and shark relatives? Well, it seems as though in the Jurassic, skates and rays were starting to make their first appearance. One of these early ray-like species was Protospinax, a flat, cartilaginous fish that had both shark and ray characteristics. Protospinax has been known to science since it was first described in 1918, but where exactly it fell in the elasmobranch family tree has been a mystery. About 25 years ago, a hypothesis that they represent a missing link between sharks and rays started to gain traction. It was finally put to the test last year in 2023. They reconstructed the shark family tree using genetic data of all living species and morphological data, or body shape information, of fossil groups. And the results were not what they expected. Protospinax was not a ray or some missing link. It was just a weirdly evolved shark. Nevertheless, they're very cool looking. I hope you were pleased with the fish section of the Jurassic.
I am pleased.
I feel like there was a lot of cool stuff going on, cool species, so let me know if you liked it. Now we're moving on to the land. Or somewhat land.
That's kind of where I got.
You remember last time, the ancient amphibian lineage, the frog, were still key players in the Triassic ecosystems. Made it out of the Great Dying, but then declined in diversity throughout the Triassic. By the time the Jurassic came along, they were being replaced a lot more drastically by modern amphibian lineages. Frogs, salamanders, Sicilians, etc. Also known as the large group, the Lissamphibians.
Write it down, Lissamphibians. That's an easy one. That is a name I've never heard of. We are in the realm of, like, I've literally not heard of any of this stuff. Ever. Like, one of every 10 things she's saying sounds a little familiar. Like, our teachers screwed this part up so bad.
I mean, there's so much to cover. There's only so much they can cover.
But they got it wrong. All we covered about the Jurassic was T-Rexes and Stegosauruses.
Replaced in ecosystem roles, just generally replaced in the fossil record. So, let me introduce you to some Lissamphibian species. Starting off with the 6-inch long Eosicilia. The earliest Sicilian that we know of. Just to be clear, I mean Sicilians. Not Sicilians. Just a quick recap on Sicilians. Sicilians look like thick worms. Respectfully, they look terrible. One species alive today, Siphonops anilatus, eat their mother's skin as a form of nutrition. Okay? And also, the mother makes milk. Yes. Sicilian milk. It has the same compounds as mammalian milk, but it is made by a Sicilian. I just got the chills. Sicilians will get their own video eventually because I feel like they're very underrated in how truly heinous they are.
Just a reminder, she's talking about the worms, not about the people.
Yeah, she showed a little picture of a Sicilian.
We like Sicilians here.
And he didn't look worm-like at all.
In this house, we support Sicilians. Okay? But Sicilians, not Sicilians. Right?
I support both. Milk-making worms and milk-making people, they're both okay with me. Yeah.
And Eosicilia seems to be one of the earliest representatives of this godforsaken
goofy
lineage.
Looking guy.
You couldn't tell already, Sicilians lost their limbs over time, just like snakes and legless lizards. Combined, they are the holy trinity. But Eosicilia still had legs, little ones, and that's really all there is to it. Next, this one's pretty cute. It's a little brain refresher. Herorus, an early salamander that looks a little sly. They were very small, about 8 inches long, and that's it. They're just cute.
That's it. Done.
Procellurus, an early frog. Another one, Notobatrachus. Not much to say about them other than the fact that they are frogs.
They're frogs.
Another one, Viaraella, one of the earliest true frogs that we know of, and Argentinian just like Geom. I don't think I have to spell out where we're at in the tug of war between synapsids, a group that includes mammals, and sauropsids, a group that includes reptiles, dinosaurs, birds, etc. So let's just get the underdogs out of the way. The synapsids. Well, they definitely existed in the shadows of the massive sauropsids of the time, which you'll see in a minute. The synapsids still had plenty of new developments that are worth talking about. Some that you might have never heard of because mainstream media doesn't give a shit about Jurassic synapsids. And that should be a crime. So let's start with the more familiar. The Jurassic is when the earliest mammals appear in the fossil record. Marsupials, ones with the pouch, and placentals. named such for the presence of a placenta. This is your classic mammal. We are placental mammals, as well as dogs, rats, bats, elephants. You get the gist. Both marsupials and placental mammals belong to a larger group, Theria. The Therians. Okay. I know that word has a new meaning in some circles, so I feel the need to elaborate.
I'm sorry. That is not a crossover I was aware of. But yeah, just, okay, all we got to know here is Jurassic equals the birth of mammals and placentas to give birth.
Right.
That's important to put it that way in the notes.
Yeah.
Give a little more context before moving on, as I'm going to keep using that word. Grab my whiteboard again. And actually, it's the exact same cladogram. I just have to get rid of the labels. One second. So, the larger group, Mammalia. Mammalia, origins, Triassic. This diverged into two groups. Monotremata, which is today's platypuses, echidnas, you know, the weird bitches, and Theria, which I just explained, then diverged into marsupials, Metatheria, and placental mammals, Eutheria, the true Therians, Eutheria.
I'm gonna draw this thing.
Okay, you need to not do that. We have to get moving.
Give me a second.
You have 10, 9,
and
8, 7.
So when I say Therians, we're not talking about this. We're talking about this. So all of this diversification happened in the Jurassic, which is pretty cool. But you probably wouldn't be able to tell at all in the first place because there wasn't a lot of morphological variation or differences in body forms. They all just looked like rats. And other rodents, like Jeremiah sinensis, an early Therian and possibly the earliest Eutherian that we know of, alive in China in the Jurassic. They seem to have lived a life in the trees, dodging dinosaurs and snacking on bugs. There have been some questions on the exact timeline of Jeremiah, whether they represent an early Therian or some of the earliest Eutherians. There's also questions from 2020 if they were even in the Jurassic or maybe at the very beginning of the Cretaceous.
Okay.
So, it's a bit muddy. Regardless, this is what the first Therians and Eutherians looked like. Yeah. This is the face of your great one eternity later great grandmother. Just rats and rodents. That was the entire mammalian lineage at this point in time. Obviously, a major development to happen to Therians was the ability to give birth to live young. No eggs needed. This allowed mammalian mothers to keep their developing babies as close as possible, literally closer than you could possibly get. No chance of a dinosaur ripping apart your eggs while you go out for lunch. The eggs come with you. This turned out to be the way to go for Therians, despite the massive energetic cost. Mammalian pregnancy is obviously a physiological nightmare.
That makes a lot of sense.
These are the mammalian groups that we know and love today. Monotremes, marsupials, and placental mammals. But plenty of other mammalian lineages existed in the Jurassic that just went extinct, like the multituberculates. They were a lot more diverse and abundant than modern lineages at the time. Here's an example of one. Rugosodon. I know. It's like just another rat.
It's a rat.
Telling you, they were all rats.
If you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you give a man a rat, you satisfy his rat desire.
The difference.
What was that?
That was so specific.
What was that?
So, like, I've heard that, you know, humans evolution. I've heard that human evolution story before.
Yeah.
Never heard the fucking rat version.
Yeah.
It's a fucking rat. I've never heard that version before. Wow.
One time, my husband told me that there was a show that he had watched and he couldn't think of the show. But in that episode of the show, the guy goes, "He's a fucking rat. He's a rat." Right? So then I spent 2 hours and I finally found the clip and I sent it to him. And he was like, "I mentioned this like 3 months ago. Why did you do this?"
She was searching every day.
And I was just like, I wanted to know what it was from.
Between multituberculates and other mammals is in the name. They had lots of tubercles, little bumps on their molars.
I was gonna say,
That's what made
mean?
These rats different from other rats. Another group, Docodonta. Some of these rats show adaptations for being semi-aquatic, like Casteracata. Yes, a more beaver form in this one, so that's pretty cool. And another one, Volevolodon, a close relative to mammals, could glide between trees, so we had flying rats as well. But yeah, overall, Jurassic mammals, less than 2 pounds, they adapted to different niches like the water, the trees, life underground, and a lot of them ate insects.
This is just such a weird, like, I don't think she just understands how weird this is.
There's so many rats.
There are so many rats, and then she's like, no, those are your descendants. At one point, humanity was just a bunch of fucking rats. That's it. That's just all those ratty behaviors you have. It's in you. It's deep in you.
That was that. I think we can move on now. Because at this point, I know you're ready for the stars of the show.
Yeah, I've been waiting.
Didn't mean for it to rhyme, but it did. The Jurassic icons, the sauropsids. To transition into this section, I figured we'd start with the most mammal-like sauropsids.
Why?
The ichthyosaurs. The dolphins of the Mesozoic.
Okay,
Remember in the Triassic, there were some hefty ichthyosaurs, like Ichthyotitan, Shastosaurus, that were more similar to a blue whale rather than a bottlenose dolphin.
Golly.
Those sizes didn't really make it into the Jurassic that we know of, but ichthyosaur diversity did reach its peak here. The true and classic streamlined shape was fully developed here as well, with some groups like the classic Ichthyosaurus. Species in this genus got to 5 to 10 feet long. Other groups like Temnodontosaurus had species that could get to 30 feet long, and I was reminded that that's how big killer whales can get. I feel like I always forget how big they are. You know what I mean? Like, they're big, and that exists in my brain, but 30 feet, dude? That's 3 times the length of my room.
You know who doesn't forget how big orcas are at any point in time? I'll give you one guess, and you don't get another one.
That's fucking insane. Ugh. Okay. Heinous. That's just heinous, 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 heinous. So, Temnodontosaurus was like the Jurassic orca. Or I guess, more correctly, orcas are modern-day Temnodontosaurus. They're also known for another impressive size record, the largest eyes of any vertebrates ever that we know of. They're about the size of a soccer ball, which is
Excuse
nuts. And
me?
these aren't just estimations either. I know that when we think about measuring prehistoric eyes, we think about estimating them due to the nature of our own eyes, which do not fossilize. But many animal forms exist on this planet that have bones in their eyes, called sclerotic rings, eye bones. Birds have them, fish, reptiles generally. There's always exceptions, and then pterosaurs had them. Dinosaurs had them, marine reptiles. The world is sclerotic rings galore, provides support for the eye. So in cases of exceptionally preserved ichthyosaur fossils, like what happened with Temnodontosaurus, scientists have been able to directly measure how big the eyes were because they have the sclerotic rings fossilized. Other exceptionally preserved fossils have determined that ichthyosaurs also gave live birth in the ocean. A very helpful adaptation for marine reptiles since they no longer had any attachment to land, which would have been tough given their overall body form. So, ichthyosaurs in general had big eyes. They were likely an adaptation for hunting in low light or murky water conditions, feeding on fish, squid, and other ichthyosaurs. Also, to be on the lookout for their predators that thrived in murky water conditions. I want to tell you a story about the discovery of one of them. In 2006, a group of scientists in Norway came across a graveyard of giant marine predators from the Jurassic. It was a pliosaur, but it looked different and was bigger than any other fossil specimens they knew of. It became known as Predator X. While scientists pieced together its identity for the next several years. You probably remember from the Triassic a group of long-necked marine reptiles, the plesiosaurs. Might also remember I said to stay tuned because they would get some pretty cool updates throughout the Mesozoic. One of these updates would be the development of pliosaurs, a group of plesiosaurs with shorter necks, massive heads, and extremely powerful jaws, making them one of the dominant predators in oceans all around the world. Before the discovery of Predator X, it was thought that pliosaurs had a max length of 32 feet, but Predator X changed things, bumped it to over 40 feet long. And it turns out Predator X was an entirely new species, but one that still represented the same traditional values as other pliosaurs. Eat, prey, kill. Another pliosaur you might be familiar with is Liopleurodon, probably the most well-known pliosaur. I also thought you would like to know there's a pliosaurid named Attenboroughsaurus.
Attenboroughsaurus,
Attenborough. So, what about other plesiosaurs? The ones that weren't pliosaurs. They were doing well too. Kind of the same shit as last time, long necks, little heads, you know, you get the gist. Another group of marine reptiles that appeared during this time were the Thalattosuchians, crocodilian relatives that existed in semi-aquatic and fully aquatic forms. Early species looked more like burial crocodiles, while later forms looked honestly like pliosaurs. Shit was getting all mixed up in the Jurassic seas. So let's move away from it.
So those things are more like clay-like, you know, they're all kind of meshing together. So we were rats, we were kind of all the same. But the fish were killing it.
And
look at what's happening in the skies. Despite the quick little mass extinction at the very end of the Triassic, by the time the Jurassic came around, pterosaurs were in full swing. They came in a variety of shapes and sizes. Like the classic Pterodactylus, 3 feet long and had 90 little teeth. Rhamphorhynchus, a group of pterosaurs with long tails and a mouth like nobody's business. Darwinopterus. Males had head crests that were likely used for display to scare competitors and pick up chicks. Some of the largest pterosaurs of the time belonged to the species, not even gonna try to pronounce that, found in, Scotland.
I was gonna say
that's the name that sounds like a wet cough. If you've seen my cutest extinct animals video, you already know what my favorite pterosaur is. One that looks nothing like the others on this list so far. One that is so cute, you could just squeeze it. Just squeeze it. A Neuronathus, one of the smallest pterosaurs that we know of. They were nothing short of cute. They had big eyes, they were round, and also fuzzy. They had wingspans somewhere between 10 to 13 inches long.
That is just insane.
They're estimated to have weighed less than the weight of a newborn kitten. Scientists assume they were covered in pycnofibers, or pterosaur fluff, which has been found on the bodies of other pterosaurs like Sortes pilosus from the Jurassic as well. Which, yes, still cute, but nothing like a Neuronathus. It seems as though pycnofibers were a universal pterosaur trait. Many well-preserved fossils have them, of both pterosaurs and close pterosaur relatives. A few other quick reptiles to take care of before the start of the show.
Real quick, she mentioned kittens, and the other day, Chavez called me, and he was like, this damn cat had kittens in our backyard.
The neighborhood cat went to the back by our grill, because we have like a car cover over the grill, and I was changing out for a new grill. I got a Nels auction for $3, and I shook out a kitten, and then I shook out another kitten, and then I shook out a third. And I go, great, now I gotta go search for kittens. They're just kittens. Live. They're alive. Live kittens. Just meowing. God damn.
He sent me a picture. They were so little.
Damn.
They were so little.
She came and ran them out of our backyard, but they didn't go far. They're literally just at our neighbor's house.
Pterosaurs and close pterosaur relatives. A few other quick reptiles to take care of before the stars of the show. Turtles. They were becoming more and more turtle-like throughout the Jurassic, a fusion of the shell elements, the shellaments. And some turtles, like Platychelys, got fancy with it. This is also when the first soft-shell turtles appear in the family Trionychidae, which just look like they're made of pancake batter. You know, just want to flip them. So that's what's going on with the turtles. Now, how about the squamates, which today is represented by lizards and snakes? We have talked about so many species that look like lizards, but none of them were true lizards. Just lizard-like. They have the classic OG reptilian form. But the earliest definitive fossils of modern lizards are from the Jurassic. And then snakes evolved from lizards, and snakes are also from sometime in the Jurassic. I did a whole video on how snakes lost their limbs as part of my tattoo series. I have a little snake on my sternum right here. And then I got another snake tattoo of a two-headed snake. I think I showed you one time, that one. So now I have either 2 snakes or 3 snakes tattooed on me, depending on how you look at it. Is a two-headed snake 2 snakes or 1 snake? Let me know what you think in the comments. Anyway, it seems as though the surface level transition from lizard to snake.
Oh, but it has 2 brains. 2 brains, 1 body. That means it's 2 snakes.
I think that's still only 1 snake.
It's 2 snakes. Because you had 1 head here of me and another head here of me. We'd definitely be 2 different people.
No, that's 1 person. That's 1 you. Just 2 parts.
Oh, 2 me's. That's why you can split them.
I guess so.
Yeah. So it's 2 of them.
Yeah.
2 chains. 2 chains on 1 neck, still 2 chains.
What if I like the other you better?
Well, I mean, I'm going to cut it off anyways, and the winner keeps the body.
Oh my God.
Well, you know, embryos eat each other in the womb.
That's a little different.
I'm a cannibal. It's the same.
All right.
The loss of limbs happened in 2 phases. First, their forelimbs became slowly reduced and lost. And then second, their hind limbs became slowly reduced and lost, rather than all 4 reduced and lost at once. There are also some major skull adaptations that happened that are actually more definitive of what a snake is rather than the lack of limbs, because, you know, these bitches exist too.
Right.
They're not snakes. They're legless lizards. And I'll be the first to say, I don't like them. Very sinister vibes from this side of the room. Anyway, the skull is what makes a snake a snake. Those adaptations that allow them to unhinge their jaw and eat something whole. Just like Tino does. Tino just ate yesterday. So it seems as though the ancestors to snakes first evolved to be able to do this, then lost their forelimbs, then their hind limbs. One of the oldest snakes ever found is Portugalophus, found in, you guessed it, Portugal. They had 4 teeny little legs, and the skull modifications of early snakes. The loss of limbs didn't seem to happen until the early Cretaceous, so we will pick up this conversation then. And now, we have finally arrived at the dinosaurs.
Here we go. Buckle up.
The moment you've all been waiting for. Obviously, the Triassic extinction didn't really slow down this lineage at the end of the day, and arguably it allowed them to become even more dominant. Even just in the early Jurassic, dinosaurs were diversifying to shit. There was an overall increase in body size and a massive emergence of new characteristics. We left off in the Triassic talking about the ancestors to dinosaurs, the archosaurs, and I mentioned some of the first true dinosaurs evolved from that larger group. Very late in the Triassic, the lineage diverged into 3 separate groups. And I drew them out while I was taking a break, so I didn't have to do it on camera. The theropods, the group that would eventually lead to T-Rex, Spinosaurus, birds, etc.
We know
Sauropodomorphs,
theropods, yep.
the long necks, the big boys, and ornithischians, which would eventually lead to triceratops, hadrosaurs, etc. How exactly they relate to each other is controversial as fuck.
All right.
Here's the traditional view. I feel like I'm not even allowed to write this. This is the traditional view. That theropods and sauropodomorphs are more closely related to each other in all three. It's extremely questionable at this point. That's as far as I'm going to get into it. The point that really matters is that we can categorize dinosaurs into three major groups.
Right.
Which is very helpful. These groups have their origins in the late Triassic and were developed, ready to go in the Jurassic.
Yeah.
So let's start with the sauropodomorphs, which include sauropods and their close relatives.
Okay.
One of the earliest sauropods that we know of comes from what is now Zimbabwe in the early Jurassic. Volcanodon. Badass name. It means volcano tooth, because the first fossil remains of this genus were found in what was thought to be, at the time, part of a formation formed by lava flows. Then turned out they were a little bit off. The skeleton was technically sandwiched between two separate lava flow layers, but not technically in a lava flow layer. Whatever. The name stuck, and it is cool. Volcanodon already had that classic sauropod shape, but they were smaller than your average run-of-the-mill sauropod.
Not so bad.
About 20 feet long, which, yes, is still twice the size of my room. But that is pipsqueak compared to some sauropods that were coming later. And this was the general trend. By the middle Jurassic, the sauropods were larger, and their necks were getting longer. Like Spinophorosaurus.
Yeah.
I like that name. It's like butter. Let's just cut to the chase. They had spikes at the end of their tail. That is so sick. If I had a tail, I would want it to have spikes on the end. Imagine if we still had tails, dude. I wonder how that would affect how we perceive people, you know? Like, would we like longer tails or shorter tails? I bet we would like longer tails with piercings on it, probably. And also spikes, like Spinophorosaurus. They're not the only sauropods with tail spikes either. Another group, Shunosaurus, also had them. Shunosaurus got to about 30 feet long, and Spinophorosaurus got to about 40 feet long, a little bit longer than that. So,
getting bigger.
Moving along, moving up in size. And some groups got even bigger than that in the middle Jurassic, like Lingwalong. They got to about 60 feet long.
That's what I'm talking about.
That doesn't really matter because they were still fucking 60 feet long. By the time the late Jurassic came around, it was just getting out of hand. Many groups show evidence of rapid growth rates, high metabolic rates during this time, and they were just gigantic. Like Brachiosaurus, one of the more well-known Jurassic dinosaurs. They got to over 80 feet long and 40 feet tall. Around the same size, Diplodocus, one of the whip-tailed sauropods, had a tail like a whip. Traditionally, it was thought that they could crack their tail like a whip for some form of defense, break the sound barrier, which is initially an insane thought. But a study in 2022 did disprove this. Unlike a classic whip, tails have flesh and bone, which could definitely not withstand the speed of sound on a regular basis, which is 761 miles per hour, by the way, or 343 meters per second. Instead, the results found that they could whip their tails fast, but around 62 miles per hour or 27 meters per second. A drastic difference if I do say so myself. I wish they could crack their tails like a whip, dude. That would be nuts. Like that guy with the massive golf club. You know what I'm talking about? I saw that the other day. I'm gonna play it because it is just outrageous.
Oh, okay. I thought she meant with the golf balls with the gunshot sounds. No, gigantic.
The guy with the giant golf club.
That's insane.
Yeah.
So when you go see these bones, it turns out to be unreal because they start you small, and what you think is big, it's like Tonka truck size. You know, you get like the little fucking pterodactyl things, and you get little brachiosaurus things like the size like a Ford, and then you go to the next room. And then it's 3 rooms long. You realize that's one dinosaur over your head.
Yeah.
It just spans rooms and rooms. Then you get to where the body is. You're like, oh my God, that's all that one thing.
Yeah.
It's not like a fun design. Insane.
Doing that with a rat. Anyway, moving on. Couple honorable mentions: Camarasaurus, Mamenchisaurus, and so many others. There are so many Jurassic dinosaurs. So, you know, as always, if I don't cover your favorite, tell us about it in the comments. And if you want more species to learn about, go look in the comments. Now we're moving on to the next group, the Ornithischians. The Ornithischians. I think I've been pronouncing it wrong up until now. If you're not super into dinosaurs...
What?
How do you pronounce it?
I don't know.
Read it.
Ornithischians, just like she said.
That's how you would say it?
Yeah.
I would say his chains.
You would not say that.
His chains.
I'm assuming these turned into birds because of ornithology.
Oh, see, that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about, Skitten. That's what I'm talking about. Whatever the fuck that means. Huh? Go Google that.
This is probably the group you're least familiar with. Like sauropods, yeah, long necks, easy. Theropods, kangaroo stance, easy. Ornithischians, who the fuck is this? And I was stoked to find out it's literally just everything else. That is nice and easy to remember. Like I mentioned, this group would eventually include Cretaceous icons like Triceratops, Pachycephalosaurus, etc. But that's looking far into the future.
Okay.
So, let's focus on the now. The Jurassic ornithischians include probably the Jurassic icon as well. Yeah, Stegosaurus. Which belongs to a larger group settled within Ornithischia that were probably the most badass dinosaurs of the time that we know of. And it just so happens to be my friend Omar's favorite group of dinosaurs. You might know him as Dinofax, who covers everything, you guessed it.
He does have a dino name
He's
too.
clearly the man to turn to for an introduction to the coolest dinosaurs of the time. So I'm going to turn it over to him
Let's
now.
do it.
Omar, take it away.
Thank you, Lindsay, and hello, folks. I'm Omar, better known as the Dinofax, and today we'll be talking about the shield bearers, the armored dinosaurs, the Thyreophora. This is a group of dinosaurs that are easily distinguished by their elaborate armor plating, giving them an almost mythical quality. They are incredibly unique when compared to most of the other dinosaurs that we know of, despite still being part of the group that Lindsay mentioned earlier, the Ornithischians. And here in the Jurassic was where they first really thrived. Even today, the exact origins of the Thyreophorans is still somewhat shrouded in mystery. The earliest confirmed example of this group is a small dinosaur known as Scutellosaurus from about 196 million years ago during the Sinemurian in the early Jurassic. There are other dinosaur specimens that are older who are argued as being part of the Thyreophora, but they have hotly debated placements, so we'll start here officially. Quick side note, all the armor you see on Thyreophorans are called osteoderms. Unlike claws, horns, and hairs, these aren't made out of keratin. Like crocodiles, the osteoderms or scutes are made out of bone deposits in the skin, which form a sort of armor. Yes, even those tall, thin plates of stegosaurids are made out of bone. These osteoderms are connected to the animal through nerves, blood vessels, and similar, which all run through the plates and spikes, making them highly vascularized like a crocodile. Most prominent of the Thyreophorans in the Jurassic are none other than the Stegosauridae, an absolutely iconic group. The earliest findings of stegosaurids are in the Middle Jurassic, with animals like Hueyongosaurus, who still maintained a lot of basal Thyreophoran traits, like a shorter neck, longer limbs, a boxy head, and more basal armor covering. Of course, stegosaurids were thought to have evolved earlier than this, but when they first arose is still not exactly clear, but we know that basal forms like Hueyongosaurus had at least appeared by 165 million years ago. Hueyongosaurus showed many of the early traits we'd come to know in true stegosaurids, like plates running down in a pair down their back and a spiked tail known as a thagomizer, which is another trait almost all stegosaurs possess. These early animals were also significantly smaller than their later cousins, as they hadn't had time to evolve their great size yet. But that wouldn't take long to change. As we transitioned into the later Jurassic, the Stegosauria diversified greatly. Their plates and spines, those changed drastically. They went all in on their defensive spines, which took on a variety of shapes. Their plates all had a thicker base within the skin before thinning out as we began to get closer to the top. In many of the Asian species, these plates were more like large spines that ran down their backs, with the largest near the hips of the animals. In animals like Kentrosaurus and Miragaia, instead of having one or the other, they had wider, more plate-like spines in the front that became more rounded and spike-like as we approached their hips. Several genuses like Kentrosaurus and Gigantspinosaurus had spikes known as periscapular spines, which jutted from their shoulders rather than their backs. The variety and arrangement of these spikes has made it difficult to classify these animals in groups, as many of the more evolved creatures share traits with older animals that seemingly have a little relation. The most advanced of these animals are the true stegosaurids, the animals most closely related to Stegosaurus itself, most of which came around closer to the end of the Jurassic. Instead of the mix and match arrangement of Kentrosaurus or the more spike-like spines of the early stegosaurids, Stegosaurus itself had tall, flat plates and a wicked-looking thagomizer with 3-foot-tall spikes. Because of how well-studied Stegosaurus is, we actually learn a lot about the group as a whole from them themselves, including that the plates were covered in keratin. A keratin covering on the plates would have given them a more solid look, like a horn, and given it sharp edges as well as increased durability. It does, however, mean that Stegosaurus likely didn't flush blood into its plates to intimidate rivals or attract mates. One thought as to why Stegosaurid plates increased in size was thermoregulation. It was thought that these plates could absorb or dump heat to help regulate the body temperature, and they got bigger because the planet was cooling during the Jurassic. Bigger plates would allow them to absorb and maintain more heat, but this theory is highly contested, so take it with a grain of salt. Unlike the Stegosaurids, Ankylosaurids weren't incredibly prominent in the Jurassic. As I mentioned earlier, their origins are still somewhat shrouded, with most folks believing that they first evolved sometime in the early middle Jurassic. I only know of 2 Jurassic ankylosaurs with decent preservation, 2 nodosaurids to be exact. Nodosaurids are the oldest of the 2 major ankylosaur groups and seem to trace their ancestry back to the Jurassic itself. Nodosaurids have recently been split into multiple groups, but that itself is a debated topic, so I'll refer to both of these as nodosaurids. Nodosaurids developed a similar head shape to that of the stegosaurids, with a somewhat thin and narrow skull in comparison to their later relatives in the Cretaceous. The osteoderms of nodosaurids are also more spike-like in shape, once again similar to stegosaurids, and they maintain the longer limbs in the Jurassic nodosaurids like Gargoyleosaurus. These animals were also smaller in size, though their size would increase as they transitioned into the Cretaceous. However, the tail clubs that ankylosaurs are so famous for don't appear in these primitive animals at all. But many nodosaurids, including Gargoyleosaurus and the other Jurassic form Memoropelta, had sharp osteoderms running down the side of their tail, like a maquatil. As the Jurassic began to come to a close, these animals were forced to change with it. However, unlike their stegosaur cousins, they would thrive in the ecosystems that would emerge in the Cretaceous, replacing the stegosaurs and becoming one of the most prominent groups, with both nodosaurids and ankylosaurs thriving across the world. Thank you all so much for your time, and thank you once again, Lindsay, for having me. Remember, folks, to drink plenty of water, be good people, and back to you, Lindsay.
All right. I think it's clear now why armored dinosaurs were the coolest.
Yeah,
Jurassic,
that was
and also
dope.
why Dinofax is the best. If you haven't heard of him before, I'm glad I was able to introduce you. So go check out his stuff.
Shout
Now
out
I gotta
to
show you a
Dinofax.
couple non-armored ornithischians real quick.
Okay.
Like this. Scientifically, his
God.
name is Pegomastix.
Jesus
Personally,
Christ.
I don't
Rough
like them.
looking.
They look like radioactive rats.
Yeah.
They're just hideous, dude.
Damn.
Look at the title of this Nat Geo article. New fanged dwarf dinosaur found. Would be nice to pet.
No.
Yeah, I don't think so.
No.
Guess what they ate, by the way? Just take a
Skin.
guess. Plants. They ate plants.
Shut
That's
up.
worse than them eating meat to me.
Shut
or
up,
even
bro.
being strictly into cannibalism.
It looks like it eats babies.
It literally drags your children out.
What do you mean
Making
it ate plants?
concerning noise.
Why do you look like that and you eat plants?
Back in the day, them plants was rough.
Oh my
Them plants was
god.
rough back then, bruh. They said, well, if it's natural, it's got to be good for you. Clearly, not.
God.
Wow.
That is deviant. To me, this is not the face of a plant eater.
No.
And it's sick. I'm sick to my stomach that it is. Let's move on. This one I feel uncertain about. Camptosaurus. I don't know how I feel about it. From my understanding, they were mostly bipedal, like theropods, but then also sometimes walked on all 4 limbs. To
Kangaroo.
feed, perhaps.
Like babies.
And that feels unstable to me. I don't like the half and half. Kind of the same way I felt about Lotosaurus from Triassic. I just feel like they're gonna topple over. It just, it's not sitting right with me. But anyway, Camptosaurus got to about 20 feet long and also ate plant material, as you would probably guess already. And before we move on to the theropods, there's one dinosaur I have to show you that doesn't currently sit within any of the 3 categories. They just got a lot of weird shit going on. Chilesaurus, from you guessed it, Chile. They were described in 2015 as a dinosaur, with no classifications any more specific than that.
Very
They had
nice.
a weird mix of traits like the body of a theropod, but the hips of an ornithischian, and was even at one point argued to be at the base of the sauropodomorph lineage, with similarities in their limb bones. At this point, the debate is somewhere between theropods and ornithischians.
Oh, we haven't cleared
maybe
this
similar
up.
to a missing link. But
Yeah.
for now, there is no consensus that I know of. So now let's move on to the theropods. If you
Yeah.
watched my last video, the Junkspiracies, T-Rex had wings. They didn't. You already have a good baseline about theropods. This lineage eventually led to T-Rex, Spinosaurus, Velociraptors, birds, etc. The heavy hitters of the Cretaceous. They have that classic kangaroo stance. So what were some of these early
Little
theropods?
hearts.
First up on the list, Dilophosaurus. A pretty big
Dilophosaurus.
theropod for the Jurassic that could get to 8 feet tall and 25 feet long.
Yeah.
Most well known for the double crests on top of their heads. Their name literally translates to double-crested lizard.
Yeah.
The purpose
Nice.
of them probably species identification or attracting a mate. Their strong limbs and generally light build made them a great candidate for active hunting. Most theropods were hunters. Dilophosaurus was an active hunter.
I will look for you. I will find you. And I will kill you.
The next one on the list
Little
is from the
stupid
Middle
hairs.
Jurassic and was actually one of the first dinosaurs ever found. Ever. From sometime in the 16 or 1700s. Megalosaurus. Another large
Megalosaurus.
carnivorous theropod. As you would expect from a dinosaur found in the
looks like a
16,
T-Rex.
1700s, some of the earliest reconstructions are heinous. Exhibit A from the 1850s. Exhibit B. This is from 1893. Exhibit C. I just pulled it up on my laptop. This is starting to fall into the nauseating category. I don't remember if I've told you this, but antique shit really freaks me out. Like dolls and pictures you'd find in like classic antique stores. Or maybe a restored historical home. It makes me really nauseous. I go into antique stores and within 5 minutes I'm dizzy. This falls into that category.
Right.
Here's another one. Just gross. It's just gross. Now their reconstructions look like this. More what you'd expect from a middle Jurassic theropod. And thank God. They're about 20 feet long and ate meat. It's also worth mentioning that their remains might be the first non-avian dinosaurs given a scientific name. A portion of a femur, initially thought to have belonged to a Roman war elephant, was illustrated and captioned in Robert Plott's book from 1677 as scrotum humanum. It has since been potentially identified as a megalosaurus femur, a portion of it. So,
he said
that's all to say that megalosaurus has been dragged through the fucking mud.
That's like the original name for avocado. Like, that's what...
Yeah.
Like, they're like,
I know what those are.
Those are testicles.
Dude, so much of history is so uncomfortably phallic. It's just not even a joke.
Yeah.
You're like, guys, grow up.
The next ones on the list you can kind of think of as the lions of the Jurassic. Allosaurus.
Yeah, we know what those are.
Time. They were 30 feet long and had massive, slender heads, crests over their forward-facing eyes, and serrated, dagger-like teeth. Most of the remains of Allosaurus have come from the Morrison Formation, situated in the western United States, and they make up 75% of all theropods found in the formation. They were abundant, to say the least. Which means a lot of research has been done on them. Like you'd expect, Allosaurus was an active predator, with evidence of Allosaurus bites in the bones of Stegosaurus, and also healed puncture wounds in the skulls of Allosaurus that match the tail spikes of Stegosaurus. They were tussling constantly. Biomechanics studies found they could open their mouths very wide, but their bite force was also very small. So ideas of how they attack their prey have varied from slashing their teeth in an up and down motion, kind of like those early ideas for Helicoprion and Adestus back in the Paleozoic. But more recent studies from 2013 found that they likely kind of plucked at them like falcons, just picking at them and
kinda
ripping
like
it back.
them.
You know? The next ones you can kind of think of as the hyenas of the Jurassic. Ceratosaurus, another top predator, but kind of existed in the shadows of Allosaurus, who was kind of the protagonist,
the
main
three
character,
kind
at
of
least
the same.
from our perspective.
The Dilophosaurus,
media,
the Allosaurus, and the Ceratosaurus.
Yeah.
They've kind of all looked the same.
They look like little T-Rexes, but not quite T-Rexes. Am I
like T-Rex cousins?
Right. They do look like distant cousins.
They looked absolutely sick, arguably even cooler than Allosaurus. Their name means horned lizard for the nasal horn behind their nostrils. They also had bony bumps over each of their eyes. They were slightly smaller, but still formidable hunters, ones you would not want to cross paths with. All right, for the next one, we're pivoting a bit. We've been on the fierce, formidable theropods. Now we're moving on to the more bohemian, avant-garde even. Yeechi, a bird-like theropod with feathers, and also wings made out of a skin membrane, like that of bats. Likely strong enough to glide between trees, nothing more, nothing less. The traditional ideas of what the road to flight looked like in vertebrates was definitely challenged by Yeechi, because before the discovery in 2007, it was the presence of either a skin membrane or feathers. Skin membrane with pterosaurs, feathers with birds, flight feathers. Yeechi has both. So, just another.
Yeechi said, ¿por qué no los dos?
Yeah, dos nos los. Los nos dos. Both, why not? Huh? Both the why. Whatever I said. I'm close.
they said, I refuse to choose. I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but whatever.
Yeah, I like that.
They said, I want everything. They were the Sharpay Evans of dinosaurs.
I don't know who that is.
It's a High School Musical reference because she has the song where she goes, I want it all, want it. Okay, anyway.
Thank you.
Another example of how nature gives shit to you straight. The path to flight is a spectrum. There have been many different experiments, and they never flew, as far as we know. But I guess I'm going to use it as my transition into arguably the most significant development in dinosaurs during their existence, the evolution of flight. And thus, birds. I know people say it all the time, almost in like a joking way, but birds are literally dinosaurs. It's not an exaggeration or a metaphor. Birds are dinosaurs. The evolution of flight and birds has allowed dinosaurs to live on to this day. Dinosaurs technically never went extinct. The non-avian dinosaurs did, but birds are dinosaurs.
Right.
So, I used to really not like birds. I don't want to say hate, but I did kind of hate them. But as I get older, dude, I'm telling you, birds have really grown on me. They're so cool. And there's so many. Those Birds of Paradise videos, dude, the nature documentaries, best ones to watch. Hands down. Matter of fact, here's a link to one.
Just so you guys know, I think we've seen like
easily
every
twice
major documentary that has come out within the last 10 years.
Twice.
Multiple times, yeah.
Easily.
Yeah.
That's probably an understatement at this point. Yeah.
And
we had to move on.
And when a new one comes out, we're like, oh, well, guess what? Guess we know what we're watching.
Cancel the legacy UFC fight watching.
Yeah.
Enter in documentary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but the Our Planet one, chef's
top
kiss,
tier.
it's so good. And David Attenborough's narration, so good.
He makes you feel like you're there. Like you're watching it, like you were there while they filmed it.
My second favorite one is what is it called? Is Night on Earth. And that one is narrated by Samira Wiley, and her voice is just so soothing. And so anyway.
I don't even remember who narrates them, though. That's weird.
I like them.
Marks the beginning of this lineage. Mark my words, there are going to be some heinous developments to come.
I'm sure.
Least expected. So what does the beginning of this lineage look like? Typically, it's represented by Archaeopteryx. Considered the transitional fossil between derived birds and the ancestral dinosaurs. They had a good half and half mix of traits of both. A full set of teeth, a long bony tail like the ancestors, but they also had well-developed feathers, wishbone, and wings, which birds have today. But the wings had claws on them, which some birds still have today. But that's a primitive thing. Primitive. Typical phalanges and such. Whether or not Archaeopteryx actually represents a transitional link between birds and dinosaurs has been debated over the years. It currently sits at not, but significant nonetheless. Plenty of other transitional species have been discovered since Archaeopteryx was in the 1800s, as well as other bird-like dinosaurs like Aurornis, Anchiornis, Xiaotingia. That's a few. The bigger question in science surrounding this development is how flight evolved in birds. What did that look like? The hypotheses are pretty much identical to the ones that we talked about with pterosaurs, but I'm going to go over them anyway and name a few others. The first one is the ground-up hypothesis. The idea that proto-wings, like pre-flight developed wings, were used for maybe balance, prey capture, display. And the wings eventually became useful for an extra boost when running away from predators. Maybe more efficient flapping turned into sustained flight. Maybe more efficient flapping turned into long leaps of flapping, which eventually led to sustained flight.
If that's how it happened, that means there's literally a bird that flew on accident and had no idea what the hell was going on.
He went to go tell everybody else, and they were like, oh, there goes crazy Greg.
Greg is Looney Tunes.
Another hypothesis that kind of complements this one is the wing-assisted incline running model. Wing-assisted incline running model.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe early flapping motions helped bird ancestors get up steep
so
cliffs.
They could climb.
Creates a bit more lift in your movement. Sounds very helpful. Then there's the trees down hypothesis. The ancestors of birds were in the trees and used their proto-wings to glide between them. We have so many examples of that today, so it's not very hard to imagine. Maybe that gliding led to powerful flapping, which led to sustained flight. Kind of alongside this is the pouncing pro-avis model. Maybe bird ancestors were leaping onto their prey from elevated surfaces. Maybe that eventually led to more sustained swoops and eventually flight. Maybe it was a nice little mix. As time has gone on, the line between non-avian and avian dinosaurs has gotten really muddy, and the development of flight was probably muddy as well. Regardless of how it happened, it would eventually allow birds to survive the mass extinction coming in the next period, and be the only remaining members of the most iconic lineage of all time. So how did the Jurassic end? It wasn't a mass extinction. In a couple periods, we talked about how scientists just kind of have to make that distinction themselves. And they usually make that distinction when there's a very obvious shift in the species that represent those periods. The dinosaurs in the Jurassic are drastically different from the dinosaurs in the Cretaceous. And a second radiation happens that you can clearly see between the Jurassic and the Cretaceous. There were also drastic changes in plant material, which probably affected that transition as well. And so, you gotta stay tuned for that. That's that.
Oh, okay,
That's
so we
Jurassic.
covered the next one.
If you like this video, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss my next. Oh, there's a quiz. Next week is a quiz. This marks the 10th video since the last quiz that I made. So that means we're due for another quiz. I know this video came out a little bit later than expected. Usually the videos come out on Saturday. So The quiz is going to come out on Saturday, like this coming Saturday. So, study up.
Okay, what's the name of the weapon on the back of the spiky thing?
Oh, I didn't write that down.
The Thane Whapperid?
No.
The Thane Whapper?
Ix.
The Thanix.
Thamerix? I don't know. I didn't write that part down.
All right, what do you got?
Okay.
What was the million years ago? 175 to what?
201 to 145.
201.
I have Ginkgo biloba.
Ginkgo biloba.
And Nangiganthus dentrostyla.
Is that the thing with the big eye?
No, it's flower. It was like a flower.
Oh, okay. It was the old flower with the organ and all that.
The big thing with the big eye was the Dolicharis, the Dolicharis.
Dolicharis, nice.
Yeah, and they said she said their eyes took up a quarter of their fucking mass.
And what's the name of those bony fish that are like still alive today? All those fish. It's 98% of all fishes.
Teleost fish.
Man, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
What else do you have that you like on there? Because we covered some dinosaurs, but honestly, it was not a bulk of the video.
Also, ichthyosaurs had big eyes.
Yeah, ichthyosaurs did have big eyes.
Yeah. The ornithischians did not have anything to do with birds, actually. And I'm confused now.
Yeah.
Isn't the study of birds called ornithology? Am I crazy?
Ornithischians, they were just like, that's every other dinosaur that we didn't want to classify. So that's kind of a funny classification.
Yep.
This one was epic. There was a lot that happened here.
It was so active, but also it was like very clearly like a transition period. You know what I mean?
There was no drama.
Right, yeah.
You know, the other ones were filled with like teetering on death.
Yeah.
Trying to find life. You know, changing food sources, changing ways to live. This was just like a diversity fest.
I'm also laughing because we were like, oh man, all of these dinosaurs look the same, but like literally that's how evolution works, is the body style that like succeeds is the body style that like adopts, you know? So like everybody was a rat. Everybody looked like a fucking Dilophosaurus.
Yeah.
You know? All the fish looked like fucking fish.
Every fish is, well, there was, but see, that's what I like about the fishes. There's a lot of diversity in the marine life.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different body shapes in the marine life.
Yeah.
They're not all just rats.
Right.
We were all just rats. Just rat.
Big rat, little rat.
Yeah.
Swimming rat.
But you go like flatfish, longfish, torpedo fish.
Swordfish.
Like, that's nutty.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I do apologize that it took so long to get here. It will not take as long to get to the next one. We will do the next one soon.
We know you're busy and doing important things and you have a lot going on. Must be something super tragic that would hold you back from this. It wouldn't be just like regular life stuff. So don't worry, Skitten.
I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to leave your reaction requests and recommendations down in the comments below. Don't forget to tell my husband how voluptuous his hair looks.
I'm Chavez.
And other than that,
and that's Skitten.
Peace out, hope it skits. It's Skitten.
Leave it in the comments.